All right, so the first time that I was introduced to SuperTac was at James and the Giant Peach. They were using this stuff for everything. So here's a version of it. So it's like it's called mounting putty. And from my experience, the white stuff isn't as sticky as some of the bluish ones like this blue, this stuff right here. I don't know, it's just the way that it's made, whatever the compound is. But this is blue stick, and this one is mounting putty. There's a couple other variations advertised, marketed under earthquake putty. But I find this stuff to be really invaluable just because you can do all kinds of different stuff with it. And that's what I would do with my puppet here. I would put like little beads of putty on his torso, and so that I could move the legs and arms, and his torso is not going to move, his head's not going to move so much. So that's just something that I wanted to add right there. Again, I think that this blue stick here is better, but I haven't seen SuperTac. This says SuperTac. Let's take a look at this one. I'd have to check this out. It could be that this is the exact stuff, but there was just gobs of it all over the studio at James and the Giant Peach, because it's stop motion, and they were using it for everything, for props, for backgrounds, for overlays, underlays, puppets. Get something to stick right on the puppet itself, and it was just everywhere. Oh my God, it was like there was like a box of this on every single animation stage, and then all over the modeling lab as well. And I've always had it. I've always had like a thing of it, and I use it all the time. You can put up photographs. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. So I just thought I would throw that out there. That's me doing attendance. Okay, so let me take a look at today. Our agenda is I want to see your projects. All right, so let's just look at stop motion projects. Let me just go through this, because I did write some comments, but I don't know if all of you had seen each other's work. This is Aaliyah. When I first started this, I was like, oh no, she's doing pixelation. That's the act of doing live action movement, but you photograph it like it was animation. So this technique right here is actually called pixelation. And we'll cover this like actually next week. It's part of the projects. And this project changes, it then becomes actual stop motion. And I think that one of the interesting things about it is that keeping track of all of those pieces, I think that if you were to try to get different degrees of motion, different speeds of motion in these pens, it might be really difficult, but this was challenging enough just as it is, trying to get a dozen objects on the stage to move in different directions all at the same time. And this again shows the importance of locking your camera down. If your camera was not locked down for this, it would be really hard to get it to read. So this was good. This was good. All right, this is Esther, and Esther's here today. I saw her.
Yes,
Did we talk about this already last week?
Yes.
Oh, we did already. All right. Oh, that's right, because I remember you said you only spent 10 minutes doing the whole thing. So you said you did the whole film in 8 minutes. Good job.
No, I said half an hour. I think
know,
that was someone else.
I'm just teasing you. Go read the contract. It says Billy's allowed to tease you if I want. All right, so this is Naomi. Naomi, did we talk about this last week? Naomi, we did. Okay, let's just take another look at it. Oh yeah, because the little light coming on. And I think I might have mentioned, I'd just like to reiterate the idea of the character coming up into the camera this close. Your camera just cannot focus that close if it's a cell phone camera. Some of the new ones can, some of those new lenses can really get in close, but this to me looks like it's just way too close, but still, this is fine. It's good, it's wonderful. All right, Servidja, did we talk about this one?
Yep.
Okay, just look at it really quickly. So, this is great. 32 seconds worth of animation. That's just a lot of work. Whenever I'm doing anything for animation, and that can include a whole bunch of different topics, I always put this little post-it up on my board that says, animation is about process. Where do you start and how do you know you're done? And then it's also about concentration. So if you're shooting this on 2s and you're doing 30 seconds of animation, that's 720 frames at 24 FPS. And that means you just kind of have to keep thinking about it. So this is actually really great, just the whole notion of keeping track of that many things over the course of 700 exposures. So good job, excellent.
I actually think the stop motion studio animates it like they have a different speed. I'm not sure what it is, but it wasn't 720 frames per second. It was around 200 frames that I did.
So is that because you set it to play on 4s or something like that?
No, I think stop motion studio does it on its own, so that it gives you like a stop motion feel. I don't think they want it to look smooth necessarily.
Right.
So yeah, for me, it was only 200 frames. Usually a minute or something takes me 300 frames.
Right. Well, at 24 FPS, a minute is 1440 frames.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and if it's, I forget the number, if it's 30 FPS, it goes up to like 1800 frames. 30 times 60, it goes up to, it's smoother. All right, so Kyla, did we talk about this one last week, Wednesday? Yeah, this one might have come in just after class ended or near the end of class last week. And I think my response was Thor and his Molinar. So having said that, I think that what I would like to do is just do this like little information blitz on you, is that America is like doing all these superhero movies. Like there's a Black Widow movie coming out, if it's not out already, and I don't even know how many Marvel movies there are. And then I was trying to get myself to watch Ragnarok, and I was totally confused because when I was looking for it, I didn't know that it was like a TV series, and Loki was like, he's the star now, he's the main hero and villain at the same time, because he's a shapeshifter. And what I had done was I think it was on Netflix, and I just clicked up here, I clicked into my account.
Yeah, I've never been doing it.
And let me see if I can find it. I think I might have searched for it. I thought it was.
It's on Disney, I think.
What's that?
I think it's on Disney Plus.
No, the one I'm looking for is the one that's filmed in Norway.
Oh, okay.
I think it might be Amazon Plus. Let me see Amazon Prime. Huh. Let me find this. I'll give you 2 more seconds here. You know, something tells me it was on Netflix, but let me just do it this way. So the one that I found was this one, and it's got this guy here. His name is David Staksson. And this is really interesting. It's a I forget what they call those now, an origin series. So it tells the story of how Thor and Loki and the giants and the all the heroes came to be. But the interesting thing is that it's completely shot in Norway. It's like it doesn't have any American sensibilities whatsoever. I highly recommend this. There's a couple of key players in there. The names of the characters are like they're not Americanized at all. It's like when you're listening to the video, watching the video, you really have to pay attention to names like Fjord. Like it's a very uncommon name, if not impossible name. Turid, Saxa. You know, it's like, to me, it was interesting, and the cinematography is great. I think they have 3 seasons now. No, they're at the end of their 2nd season. So yeah, this is great. It does say Netflix, but for some reason I couldn't find it. I highly recommend this. When you click on this like David guy, you know, he hasn't really done that many things, you know, and so this is his like first step into film and movies, but he's doing really well. He plays manga, and he becomes Thor, and it's just really great. The acting is generous. The camera is, everything about this is really great. So I highly recommend this. Again, I was looking for the Americanized version of Ragnarok, but I like this one. It's really fun. It's a TV series, so each one of the episodes is like 52 minutes long. So yeah, if you have Netflix, check it out. Check it out. Check it out. So that was me just responding to Kyla. Did I say that right? Kayla. All right, and then we have Roberto. I just turned that off because it might not scrub into YouTube correctly. If that ends up becoming an issue. If it does become an issue, I don't know if I want to edit the video or anything, but this looks pretty good. The thing that caught my eye was that there were a couple of inherent camera repositions in there. But I think that you got a lot out of the ability to how much movement can you get out of these little Legos guy with their Lego base. And again, the introduction of your hand here is technical pixelation. So, and that's part of your lecture. Okay, so that was pretty good. This is Tiffany. Yeah, I wrote a little note in here because you always want to make sure your videos are oriented correctly. So this is, you know, a vertical setup, and if it's supposed to be horizontal, then like I said, or might have mentioned that one of the things about animators is that we end up becoming extremely familiar with tons of different applications: Photoshop, InDesign, After Effects, Illustrator, Maya, Toon Boom, Media Encoder. You know, all of a sudden you get to this point where it's like, oh, a new application. This should be fun. Where in the past, when you're learning applications, it can be terrifying. You know, learning Photoshop doesn't take just a day. It actually takes a while to figure out where everything is and how everything works and how to fix things, if you know what I mean. So this would just, you would just take this into After Effects and rotate the video, or take it in a media encoder and rotate the video. You could do this in lots of different places. So it's part of the thing that we do as animators, is that you just have to become completely carefree, completely fearless when it comes to all these weird applications down here. So this is working, but I would prefer that video, it was horizontal and not video, not vertical. And also keep your lighting more correct, right? You got this big shadow across the middle there. I'm not quite sure that you intended that. Those are my comments there. Okay, so this is new to me. Brenna. Boy, the movie didn't start and then you ended it. The end. So I think, you know, this is fine for found object animation. Let me make a mark right here. I think that one of the things that might have made this a little more interesting, maybe, is if you would have had the title slate be actually a word, so that these little crumbles of paper actually spell something out, like Gone with the Wind. And then as you uncrumble them, right, that it becomes the end. So let me ask you this. Having said that, Brenna, are you on microphone today?
Yeah, I can unmute.
So did you record this and then play it backwards for us?
Mm-hmm.
You started with the end and you crumbled it up and went to the beginning. So I think that one way to make this just a notch or two more creative is that you are thinking backwards, and so you know that you want to end your movie with the clean cutouts of the end. But if you thought back to the beginning, I think that you could just get tons of little crumbled pieces of paper to spell something out, whatever it is. Billy's Big Adventure, whatever it is. And so that just becomes like tiny little crumbles of paper that you technically end with, but start with. So yeah, this is good. Not technically found animation, but that's okay. That's okay. All right, Lauren. All right, you know, just before we start, once again, I just want to put this out there that you want to keep your videos horizontal. Save the vertical videos for social media. And you see this, if anyone watches ABC Channel 7, or ABC is owned by Capital Cities, which is owned by Disney. They do America's Funniest Home Videos. No one's seen America's Funniest Home Videos. If someone submits a video that's vertical, they have to bleed it out because they don't want these like two huge pillars on either side of the video. So almost always they take the video and just explode it really big so that there's actually something there. For whatever you can manage, whatever you can plan, whatever you can think about doing, make sure your videos are always horizontal. Okay. So that works. It's good, Lauren. It's timed really well. Your camera's nice and tight. Yeah, the only thing that I would recommend is making sure it's a horizontal camera. All right, we can put claps up there in the video. Yay! Next post? No, is that it? All right, so I think that was us catching up on stop motion.
Mr. Billy?
Yeah.
Did you see the bouncing ball that I posted?
I think I looked at it. That's why it wasn't new. So let me go to the bouncing ball. Oh, there it was. This one, Esther?
Yes.
Yeah, I think this is good. I put a comment in there that the idea of that the ball getting smaller looks like you're introducing a sense of perspective to the shot, whether you intended that or not, right? Hold on.
Yes, I kind of wanted to roll out.
Wanted it to roll away.
Yeah, like
Well, I
that.
think it's really good. I think that if you were being a little bit more particular
Yeah.
and listening to your favorite teacher at the same time.
Oh, I couldn't really find the video.
What video?
Because I know for the bouncing ball, I know you
Oh,
record it live, but I
oh.
couldn't find it.
Well, when you're in the class, just go to the discussion area. This is the wrong class. Is this the right class? Oh no, this is the right one. Go to the discussion area right here. Click on discussion.
Okay.
And then in this list, there's going to be a Zoom recording.
Oh,
So, and
got
when you
it.
click on that, it'll show up like this. You can click it here. You can just click it there. So they show up in that discussion area. All right. So what I would recommend here
Yes.
is just following the rules of cinema, like and storyboarding, like I had told you. So this is just a refresher for everyone. When you're dealing with animation and cinema, you always divide up your screen into horizontal thirds and vertical thirds. So that gives you 4 main focal points where those cinematic thirds cross, right? And then you have a focal point in the middle. And then remember that you have an action safe area in the corner. So you want to keep all your action away from the edge of the screen. And then you have a title safe area, and you don't want any words inside this title safe area. And that's technically about 20% of the whole fielding. And then the comment that I was making is that it's always common in cinema and therefore animation to want to keep your horizon at or around this cinematic third here. So I just put my horizon just a little bit lower, right? And I'm doing it scratchy like this just to like give you the idea that there's, I don't know, we're outside and there's trees or something or buildings or something.
Okay.
And then remember that you have a vanishing point, and that at this, and this is just really good practice, is to always give yourself some sort of grid so that you understand where the perspective is and where it's coming from, where it's going to.
Yeah.
Right, so if this is the horizon, then you want a ground plane. And then from the ground plane is where you want your action to be happening. So you can set it like right here.
Yeah.
And in a digital application, you would put all this stuff on another layer so that you can turn it on and turn it off. And then that way, if you have your ground plane like right here, so I'm going to put ground plane over here, that you can actually go to another layer and plot out your arc. And so you can have a layout layer that just says, oh, I want my bouncing ball to come in here. This is about halfway. And so the next bouncing ball is going to be about right there. Remember the decrease. And this is the thing about what you are doing, Esther, is that your vertical deceleration and your horizontal deceleration are now going out into perspective. And so what this setup right here looks like is something like this.
Yeah.
So let me get this in here. And this is usually a pretty lively bouncing ball. Sometimes bouncing balls lose their energy in real life just a little faster. And then they tend to roll over here. So this would be just a horizontal ground plane. And now if you wanted to do it your way, the way of planning it would be, is that your ball could come off the screen, but now your ground plane is going to go off into perspective. And so the correct way of plotting this out, and I'm just going to be really scratchy so that you can see it.
Okay.
And then you could consider that this would be your vanishing point. So this is your new vanishing point, and that this line of deceleration actually is quite a bit steeper. And it comes in from off the screen. And now just think about it. Now your ball is going to come in like here, and it's going to land like right here. And then you just have to do that thing in perspective. And so in perspective, what I'm going to do is a perfect 90 degrees right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to see this angle right here you can figure out where the next one is going to go by going backwards. So let's say that there was that your arc was like way over here, right? Something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this vertical, this perpendicular, and this perpendicular, and I'm going to go from the bottom of one to the top of the other and just draw a perfectly straight line. And then the way you figure out your perspective, you don't have to do any math. You don't have to do anything else. Just take this line right here and make this line parallel to it. See what I did? So that's the next vertical.
Okay.
And then do it again. Oops, that's not a good one. Hold on. So these two lines are parallel. And then you do it again. Then so this is parallel. And this is just a really easy shortcut way to find your perspective. And this can be useful for anything if you're drawing telephone poles or trees or whatever in perspective, because now that you've got this, now you can get in there and say, oh, well, here's my arc. And then here's the top of the middle, and here's your next arc. And then your next one. Now this again, I think that this is just an example, but this bouncing ball technically is really aggressive. I would just like get rid of that. And then on top of that, when you're doing your layout, then you bring in your first ball. So your first ball should be nice and big.
Okay.
Like this. And then you just make a note for yourself. I'm going to color that in just so you can see it. So you can make a visual note for yourself and say, by the time the ball gets all the way out here, it should be really small. And so you have to just plan this out. The ball probably stays about the same size. It's got the squash and stretch right here. And sometime around here, it can start to get a little smaller. And you can do this. It can be done. I think that you just have to now put everything that you learned about easing in and easing out and the ball positions in perspective. So that's like the correct way to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm gonna clear this.
Should I leave it or should I redo it again?
No, you don't have to redo it.
Oh,
You know, technically what you've got going,
okay.
is if you wanted to make some like critical adjustment and say, this is the first bounce, squash, stretch, The second bounce has just a little bit of squash and stretch.
Okay,
But even from my diagram here, I would probably get the ball to not bounce so high on this bounce,
yeah,
which means that this line would actually be a little bit steeper, and that the energy would die a little faster out here in perspective.
Got it.
But the problem is that on a typical bouncing ball, students can get away with 10, 20, 30, 40 drawings total. But the way you've got it, if this thing is going to bounce out here, this could be like 80 or 120 drawings, but depending on how lively the ball stays as it's in perspective. But so this is just for you to know it. One of the things that you may want to take away from this is how to set up the proper parallelism in perspective. This is
Okay,
the easiest shortcut to remember how to do anything that's geometrical in perspective.
got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. All right, so having said that, I think that your bouncing ball is just a little bit too squashy stretchy.
Okay,
So I'm gonna go play and stop. And I think that one's fine. So this is fine. This one is good right here. So but I think that the squashy stretchy thing, it's impossible. I mean, your ball is only maybe going 10 or 15 miles an hour, right?
yeah,
And in animation, we always want to think about the speed of things. And it's true that if this was a rubber ball and you dropped it from a very high height, that ball might be deforming because of the air pressure, the air resistance on it. But the problem is that right about here, you start deforming the squash or the stretch already. And so that's why it looks really squashy stretchy, is because you got 1, 2, 3, 4 drawings of stretch. And that's just inconceivable. You know, just one drawing before the squash
yeah,
and one drawing after, and that's as much as you need.
okay.
And then my guess is that this stays stretchy. And so did you do this in like Flash or Animate or something?
I did on Adobe Animate.
Oh yeah, you did. So you just said create a tween.
Could you please repeat that?
Yeah, you said create a classic tween.
Oh, no, I didn't do that. I just did it frame by frame.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, that was a pretty lively squash and stretch. And then you do it again.
yeah,
So you got 1, 2, 3, and then stretch or squash. 1, 2, 3. So it's just really lively with all
Okay.
that squashing and stretching. So
Got it.
it's working, but it's just technically,
yeah,
I would put this into the category of over animated.
okay.
And sometimes directors like that. Did you ever watch The Croods?
The Croods?
Yeah, The Croods, CROODS.
I don't think so.
That animation was completely over animated. The characters are just running around and screaming at each other constantly. So again, this is good. Let me go to the next one. All right, so I should have some cutout stuff in here to talk about. It looks like I have one more stop motion coming in. Oh, it was just a comment here. Okay. All right, so cutout animation. This is all new. I'm gonna make notes. So my first one is Esther.
I just want to explain that I did the head and like it was the head that I did.
Oh, right. Yeah, you
So
followed
it
the,
might not show a lot in the video, but I just wanted to explain it.
okay.
Okay.
Okay, this is really good. Thank you, Esther. Sometimes it's nice to see animation tests and things like this that are just not really fast paced. It's fun to see things that are that move just at a slower pace. So what are these green things supposed to be? Trees?
Yeah, they were supposed to be branches.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think this is good. It's very creative. It's very art oriented. There's a whole bunch of neat aesthetics in there. Thank you, Esther.
Thank you.
Cutout. This is cutout. Cindy. Hi, Cindy. Oops, it played automatically. Okay. How did you make your puppet? Did you follow examples from the
Yeah, I used your example from the videos.
okay.
I got the wolf.
And you've got the, oh, I see. I should have looked at here. Could have answered my own question. Okay, so this is good.
Yeah,
Did you have fun making your wolf?
stressful, but yeah.
Yeah, it glue everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, good. So this is exactly where you want to be. I might take just a small little issue with, I could click this 10,000 times, right? This play button, and then you'll get a notice from YouTube. It's like, oh, cool. You're gonna end up making money on YouTube. So right, this is exactly where you want to be, because you've got movement happening in different places. I'm not sure that the front feet are articulating exactly how you would want them to be, but I can see just from your puppet that this is exactly where you want it to be. Good job. Put your wet fat flippers together up in the video for Esther and Cindy. Tiffany. Nice. Put your wet fat flippers together for Tiffany, everybody. Okay, this is very good, very imaginative. I think that you do yourself well by concentrating on just the arm movements and doing the replacement faces and getting a little narrative working with the different masks that she's putting on, and technically not having to worry about anything like a walk cycle or a run cycle or anything. To me, you made a really good choice here by keeping it just in one place and just playing around with the acting and the masks. That's why this is working. That's why it's successful. Your puppet looks good. The articulation looks really nice. Timing is good. You don't bump your camera around too much. Good job. Hands together for Tiffany, please.
I kind of wanted her waist to move, so I gave her articulation in her waist, but I never needed to use it in the first place.
Right. Technically she has legs under that dress. And so you would have to think to yourself, how would I get this character to walk if it had a dress like that on? So you would have to give yourself 4 different dress shapes to get her to move correctly. But then you realize that your character is in the front view and she would be sidestepping, and that could be weird. but it also could be cool. All right, Servidja looks like she's got 4 different things in here. We've got 50-second video here. So this looks really fun. And this is just extra credit, right? Servidja.
I mean, like, I just really liked doing them, so I did like
Yeah.
four of them.
Yeah, I think it's fun.
I just use the same 4 shapes, like, or the same shapes in all of my
Oh, okay.
animation. I did different things with them. So.
Okay. So, and making a minute-long video is going to take you about 45 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So now what I'm going to be looking for is you studying pacing. Get things to move a little faster.
Mhm.
Get things to move a little slower, a little faster, a little slower. So I think this is great just in terms of studying how to get things to move just with found objects, paper. Now your next step is to really get in there and explore just how fast you can get things to move.
Mhm.
And I will forever curse the QuickTime people, the Apple people, because there was a version of QuickTime Pro where I could just very quickly change the speed of any video to 2, 3, 4 times faster, 8 times faster, or make it half as slow or 4 times as slow, and give you the artist an idea of just what it's like to discover pacing just by making the whole thing really fast or the whole thing really slow. You can't do that anymore. You did 4-minute-long videos for extra credit. Okay, you're definitely mastering the idea of having fun with this. In all the years I've taught this class, I don't think I've had anybody do 4 different variations. So this is great. This shows ingenuity, creativity. Let's look at the last one here. Again, your camera's nice and tight. It's not moving around. That always helps. Here you've got a square format. I didn't know if the other ones are all square either, but
Yeah, they were.
it's a thing that you can just kind of do if you're planning on putting these up on social media.
Yeah, no, the backgrounds that I really liked using were all squares.
Right,
So, like, I liked the color, the marble and all that.
right. Okay, crazy. Hands together for Servidja. Yay! Okay, definitely answering the idea of how to have fun with the animation. This is Aliyah. And yell at me if I pronounced your name incorrectly.
Yeah, it's Alia. And
Alia.
I discovered way too late that I decided to do way too much for my first time doing this.
Okay. It's great though. This is really fun. I like how you're thinking of foreground elements moving. You've got the wind moving. Got actual little camera move in there as well. And they look like they're moving correctly. It doesn't look like they're jittering or going back and forth. The rabbit enters, he's in a good place on the screen. Camera's nice and steady. Well done. Hands together, please. Yay! Okay, yeah, your aesthetic is fun too. So it looks like you took pictures of things that were just green and made grass out of them. Is that close to what you were doing?
Yeah, I was looking through a bunch of magazines.
So you were just going for color and then you made the shape out of them. It's great. You know, I think that there's a lot of aesthetics going on here all at the same time. So now that you've done this, one thing that now, and you might just like turn all of your creativity on here, where you might have wanted to take a piece of green paper or a series of just pieces of green paper like this, right? And pivot them right here. So you're making just like the simplest puppet, right? And then you just get these to move back and forth just a little bit, just because they're swaying in the wind. And if you thought about it, if you wanted to introduce a stiffer wind, you could actually take these pieces of grass and the wind is blowing this way. So you articulate all of these downwards. And then when they're coming back up, you flip them over. So now that the shapes look like this, because the wind is blowing the other way. You know what I mean? So you get these to go all the way up, and then you return with these. So you start here, you go down with these, and then you go up with these, this group, and then you come back down to here. And you do a test. You might be able to get this thing to be on 4s, and you might be able to loop it 36, 72, 96 frames. And then you loop it and you put that over the top of everything else. But it's just something that, because you've got background, midground, foreground, extreme close-up, it's just something that just occurred to me that it could be something that you could produce rather easily. All right, let me make sure I recorded that. Okay, got it. Let me refresh this. Roberto. You cut off his head. Okay, so what we're looking at here technically is a hybrid of the example that I had shown all of you a couple of different times about using a down shooter or now using a horizontal camera. And so this camera is coming in at about 45 degrees. I think it's fine. It's just on the verge of not being able to see this character clearly. in my book, it might have been a little bit easier to see and been a little bit more aesthetic to just put the camera completely down and use it as a down shooter. But it also looks like you just have your character with pieces of paper. So yeah, he's stretching and coming apart. I think that that's interesting. So rather than struggling with the idea of how to keep your puppet integrated, you have literally just said, well, I'm just going to give him all the parts and I'm going to move the parts independently. To me, I would just be panicked. I would be freaked out if one of those pieces got moved incorrectly or someone opened a window and all the pieces moved way too much. How would you get that back? And this answers my question. Well, we don't have to do it in this class, but the other class has to actually answer questions about what the difference between 3D and stop motion is that imagine, Roberto, imagine that you're in the middle of this, you're like right here, and someone did something that blew all your paper away. You know, there's no way that you could get all these little pieces of paper back in the exact same registered position without moving even an inch. So if I was doing this, I think that I probably would have either put tie downs or weights or glue on my notepad so I knew that it wasn't going to move around at all. As it is, I think that you were just really careful and you made sure that you didn't bump your sketch pad. So this is great. There's a little variation in lighting. Your sketch pad does move around a little bit, but we like the idea. This is like one of the first times I've seen where someone has tried to make a puppet like this and said, hey, what happens if the puppet just get all stretched out, right? I don't think that you have that ability to do that unless you make that decision to not articulate your puppet. Again, this is interesting. It's very cool, but it's very dangerous. You just get someone to sneeze, or if you have a cat that likes to come up and help you, then you have to shoot the whole thing over again. This is great. Roberto, hands in the camera for Roberto, please. Very interesting. All right, this is Naomi. All right, so what Naomi is doing here is using a puppet, but you're changing out the legs. So you're doing like replacement parts. Let's just look at this frame by frame. My computer's freaking out here. Hold on a second, everybody. There we go. How many different legs did you make, Naomi?
I made 4 legs.
4 different legs? And how do you have them attached? Or are they just like sitting behind it?
It's just sitting behind it.
Just sitting behind it. So I'm curious as to, because it looks to me like you've got it registered fairly well. My computer's freaking out here. Hold on. I would be interested to see how I could direct you into getting a little bit better production value out of this by making sure that your character's body is registered. And I think that what would really help is that super text stuff that I just mentioned. The other thing that you'll see animators doing is that they'll have, let me just do it like a little sketch for you here, is that they'll have their camera. And so you kind of have to imagine what I'm doing here. This is your camera. And I'm just going to assume that you were using a cell phone camera and that you had it tied down on a tripod or something, and that it might have been actually straight down, right? So one thing that animators sometimes have is that they'll have a feed that comes out of the camera and it'll go into some sort of monitor. I've seen different variations where this monitor is actually a computer monitor. I've seen it where this monitor is an iPad. There's all different kinds of video referencing here. And instead of doing anything on the stage over here, what they'll do is they'll have the character drawn on the screen with like these pens that can draw on glass. And they'll make little marks. And they'll say, well, here's where I want my legs here. And then they'll say, here's my arc. Here's my arc. And I want the arms to go like this. And they'll actually put little positions in there for where they want it so that the registration isn't here, that it's on this little video monitor. You saw this when we were seeing the making of Dot from last week, when they were using the Nokia camera to shoot that video. So that's just another way to do it. You're using a video monitor to register. All right, so this looks good. Let me make sure I make a mark in my book for Naomi. Let me refresh my screen. Okay, so I don't see anything new just at the moment. All right, take 5, everybody. Share my screen. Oops, there's a new message in there. So let's go over here. So let's just look at the introduction to pixelation from the Academy. Same thing as always, just the introduction on. So this is their example that they're showing you.
Before we look at the examples of pixelation, I want to make sure it's clear what it really is. Pixelation is basically stop motion with real people and real objects, or the combination of the two. So to do this little bit of simple pixelation, I basically just moved a little bit, took a frame, moved a little bit, took a frame, repeatedly. In this case, without having a helper, the camera is set for time lapse. We'll get into technical parts and how to do everything later. So that's the very basics, but we'll see how much more creative we can get with pixelation and see what we can do on our own and even just with a little bit.
All right, Target had a whole bunch of stuff within their ad agency using pixelation. This little advertisement here that they're just showing you an image of was probably from 8 to 10 years ago. And a couple of them are really, really extensive. It's not the easiest thing to do, but it's fun. So we just saw This Is Neighbors by Norman McLaren, 1952. All right, so that's live action. That's coming in at just 24 frames per second. And then it's going to change. So that bag started moving and now this is moving. This is all pixelation. Actually, technically that's stop motion. It's not pixelation until you get the people in there. All right, so yeah, technically this is just stop motion. Let's see if there's some people that show up. So this is interesting because that's reading like live action, and they just did stop motion on the props. Let's jump around a little bit. All right, so this is all still live action. I'm not seeing pixelation in the human action part of it. So let's take a look at this one. So I'm just going to pause this for a second because obviously the cinematographer's got the camera pointed up at this building. They're in the middle of the courtyard or something that's in front of the building. And in order to get this effect of this little plant, quote unquote, pixelating or moving around, they're literally just taking a photograph and another one and another photograph and another one, like it was a movie, and letting the position of that plant be random. So the wind is blowing it around and it's just being random, but it kind of reads. It's kind of an interesting little effect. It's experimental. So one of the things that you're going to look for here is that you've got your actors coming in with hands that have these gruesome gargoyle fingernails on them. Is this action smooth? If it's smooth, then it probably is live action. If it's jumpy, if it's just jumping around, then it could be pixelation. So let's study that for just a moment. So this is interesting because this plant looks like it's stop motion, but then the hands look like it's live action. So in order to do that, what you would have had to have done was shoot this building and the plant and let it loop, and then do these hands over a green screen and then composite the hands over the stop motion. Does that make sense to everybody? Because you can't have live action and stop motion in the same exact shot. So this becomes pixelation. So going backwards with these hands over here. So these hands, another alternative way to do this is to do the plant in stop motion pixelation and have the actors do it in camera, but just do it slowly. So instead of pushing them to act, instead of having them do something that is in real time, you give them the idea of what they're supposed to do with their hands, but then they're supposed to do it very slowly. So now go back and look at it. In, out, in, out. So this technically is pixelation. And this is the same thing with just a different camera view. And this is pixelation. He gets up, he jumps. This is all pixelation. So, right, so that's all pixelation. And a big production. You can't do this with 3 actors and have a 4-minute film and try to do it easily. So that's interesting. I don't know how to say this. All right, and so I just mentioned ads for Target, and they're actually mentioning in this class. So this is a Target advertisement. So let me So you can all grab that link in the chat area if you want. Isabel sent that up there, okay. All right, let's take a look at what the other module was here. All right, this could be interesting. How to set up for shooting pixelation. So let's take a look at this video.
Light as you can, and you don't have to point it at the subject. It can look good to point the lights at the ceiling, just to add additional.
I'm going to replay this.
As always, want to use a tripod to keep the shot steady, or some other method of holding the camera still. I'm using an iPad using a special grip. If you're shooting inside, be sure to use as much light as you can, and you don't have to point it at the subject. It can look good to point the lights at the ceiling, just to add additional ambience and to avoid harsh shadows. Go into the app and set it for 12 frames per second again. Make sure you got it on manual so the focus and white balance doesn't change. I've got an assortment of light sources for this, so I'm just going through and choosing whichever one looks the best. And then adjusting the shutter speed for to average out the lighting, like if you got a strong backlight, want to compensate for that. If you're shooting without an assistant, you can set Stop Motion Studio to use the front camera, and then set a timer for time lapse for about how much time you need to change poses. Sometimes just 5 seconds is enough, might need more time if it's a more elaborate action. If you're doing the down shooting, you can set the camera up on as tall a tripod as you can, or set it up on a high up place like on a balcony. When shooting outside, still always with a tripod, just changing the white balance and the exposure. See, in this case, I've got that really bright spot. So I'm going to adjust the shutter speed to try to even out that light. Now, I always just like to double check and make sure that it's set for manual so that there's no focus changing during the shot. Next, we'll look at the how-to and various options that you have for creativity and technique, and whether you got some help to shoot or a volunteer to perform or an unwitting volunteer.
Okay, so he was saying Stop Motion Studio there. I don't know if you were all able to get Stop Motion Studio. I don't think I have it on this build of this computer. Just do the best you can. Let's take a look at what this one is. All right, so this is the next movie.
So we'll start with something simple, like just rolling around in a chair here, and a little bit of body animation just to try out some ideas. For this one, I have some help. So I've got the camera set for the back camera and framing it up so that all the action is going to stay in frame, but not so wide that that the subject is really small. And then, as with other animation, I want to start with a hold, just shooting 12 frames, and then move a little bit, take a frame, move a little bit, take a frame. The idea is to get into this rhythm where you move and then your camera operator takes the frame. And also getting in slow in and out. I make the first move slow, and then as the shot moves on, start making each move faster and faster. And then when it's time to stop, start making them slower and slower. And it's remarkable how much you can get shot when you get into the rhythm. And you can even just improvise as you go. I was just kind of coming up with stuff as I went along here. Then we get into secondary action, which is when the chair stops, when somebody just kind of do some follow throughs, some flopping about. And it's trying to combine sort of like natural movement, but a little bit weird and unusual. Like in this case, when I stop moving, my head moves back and forth. And so it's just like one side in a frame and the other side and the frame. And then slowing down slower and smaller and smaller until it's done. And then a hold at the end. And this actually took maybe just 10 or 15 minutes to shoot. And we can introduce props. And this one also getting into timing. I'm shooting this one on my own, so yeah, I'm setting it for manual and then setting the timer for however long I think I need to make the changes. I put props in myself, so could this be as much as 10 seconds, but I think 5 will be okay. And since I can see the screen, onion skinning can be helpful. So I'm doing the usual hold at the beginning and then a small move to look up, starting with small moves and going faster and then slower again to ease in and out, and being very careful about my eye direction because the eyes are very clear in frame and I want them to stay locked on. So again, ease in and ease out with the hand movement. Very small for the first one, a little bigger the second, a little bigger the third, until it gets closer, and then they go slower. In this case, then swapping in the prop and making another similar arm move coming out. And every time there's a change, I'm holding for a few frames, but even facial expressions to give a chance for those poses and moves to read. When making a facial expression change, see if you can make that change in 2, 3, or 4 moves. And just be sure to hold that expression as best you can for as long as it's right, so that it gets a chance to read and get a little bit of acting into the scene that your character can react. Here I'm moving the hat and I'm holding my head as still as possible. Now we're going to see about having even more fun with some props by getting in more objects and sort of like combining found objects with pixelation. It's replacement animation and taking some of one thing out and adding another. Doing it in as many frames as you can with the time that you have. Shooting straight down can give you the options of doing things that you can't do standing up. Just need either a really tall tripod or some other way of mounting the camera up high. For this, I'm doing pose to pose and then animating objects, and kind of see this would have been a little easier if I did have an assistant. Hope you can get some help. By the way, to make a really strong impact, make the last move right before the hit a really big move, and then make the reaction really quick. Here, I'm just really trying hard not to bump the tripod, but still trying not to make every move too big so that you can actually see what happens. Here's an example of shooting outside where you've got some more space. I've got some help on this one, so I'm doing a hold at the beginning. And instead of just starting to move, just want to do some things that can make it a little more interesting to start by both having the steering wheel appear and then like a big anticipation of moving forward and back, and like I'm pushing forward. Anticipation is a big principle in animation, and you can see that it does kind of push the action into something that's a little bit more entertaining to watch. And take your time as you're doing these actions. Don't make the moves too big. This, again, it just took about 10 or 20 minutes to shoot. It doesn't take that long when you've got help and you've got the idea all worked out. You can see here, though, that I am speeding up as I come around the corner, and that makes it a little bit more interesting in that the starting slow, getting up to speed, and then zipping out at the end. For this little piece of animation, where the prop is moving and the person isn't, you definitely need help with that, where the subject holds as still as possible, and then the camera operator can move the prop a little bit at a time, again with an ease in where the first moves are slower and then it gets up to speed, and moving along at a steady rate so the lights don't make a sudden change. And you can see it's challenging to hit the same pose every time, but I think the payoff is good. So there's some examples of different ways to shoot pixelation. Just have a look at your resources and shooting spaces and see what ideas you can come up with.
Sound effects. Based on what you've learned about making pixelation, which of these is not a good advice? Compose your shot as simply as possible. That sounds good. Have your camera operator hold the camera as still as possible. Maybe we'll come back to that. Plan your action thoroughly. That sounds good. We're looking for not a good advice. When your performer goes into a pose, have them hold still and shoot several frames. No, the one I don't like is this one. Hold the camera, use a tripod. So they're telling you, Michael is telling you, use a tripod. All right, I think that ends that little lecture right there. And I thought of something, then I forgot it. What was I thinking? I forgot what I was thinking. All right, let me jump over here. Do I have any questions? Does everyone have an idea? Oh, the one thing that I wanted to, I think that that's what I was thinking, is that come up with several ideas, write something down in your sketchbook. What do you want to do? Do you want to do it outside? Do you want to do it inside? Do you have someone helping you? If you have a tripod, it's ideal. Don't try to have someone hold your camera, because if you're using your cell phone camera and you're holding it, it's going to move around whether you're trying to hold it very still or not. So just like our author said, just like Michael said, find some way to lock that camera down. Keep that camera nice and steady. And even though you're not using Stop Motion Studio, you just stitch your images together like you were doing it as stop motion. So that's kind of just like my rant, if you will. That is my rant. We meet on Wednesday, again at noon, and then next week, Monday, Wednesday, and that is it. I believe there's only 3 more sessions of our class. So use your time wisely. Like I said, when we opened up today, there's a couple of you who have stuff to get caught up on it, and I'm totally okay with that. Esther, you might need to still do thumbnails, storyboards.
Oh, I did.
You did?
Yeah, did it not send through?
Could you put it in, just put it in the instructor office? Just, if you have another, just put another copy in the instructor's office.
Okay. Is that the only thing?
Is that the what?
Is that the only thing that I
Yes,
need?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I didn't know why that it didn't turn in.
And I might have already seen it, and I don't make all the marks in my book correctly, but you're okay. Don't worry, you are okay.
I'll resend it though.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if I have just a couple minutes here. Give me just a moment. I'm going to see if I can find another really good example. Oh yeah, I like this. So I'm going to come back to the sharing screen, but I'm going to pause recording. Like I said, I'll put this up on YouTube in about an hour. If you have any questions, use my Yahoo, or you can put it in the instructor's office. I will see you all on Wednesday.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
One new message.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Have a good day.
Hey, you too, bye.